I am Sarah Vance, 34 years old, and a venture capitalist who manages high-risk assets for some of the wealthiest families in Connecticut. My job is to spot liars and bad investments before they can do any damage, yet I failed to see the most dangerous liability sleeping in my own bed. David stood in the driveway of the estate I had purchased 3 years ago, his hand resting on the door of the silver Mercedes S-Class that I paid for. He looked at me with those soft, wet eyes that had fooled me 1,000 times before. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his lips lingering just a second too long, performing the role of the devoted, burdened husband to perfection. "I am going to close this deal in Chicago for us, Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Every cent of commission goes to Leo's treatment fund. I know the new experimental therapy in Zurich is expensive, but I will make it happen. You have done enough for us. You just rest this weekend." I nodded, feeling a familiar mixture of guilt and exhaustion. "Be safe, David," I said. He climbed into the car, the engine purring to life. He waved once, then backed out of the long driveway. I stood there hugging my cashmere cardigan around my chest, watching the taillights disappear around the bend of the oak trees. The heavy iron gate swung shut, with a final metallic clang sealing me inside. I was alone, or at least I thought I was alone with a paralyzed 14-year-old boy sleeping in the guest wing. I turned and walked back into the house. The silence of the foyer was heavy. I locked the front door and headed toward the kitchen to brew a cup of chamomile tea to calm my nerves. The moment I crossed the threshold from the hallway into the kitchen, it hit me. A smell, thick, pungent, and terrifying. It was the unmistakable stench of rotten eggs, sulfur, gas. It was so strong it made my eyes water instantly. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dropped my phone on the counter and rushed toward the massive industrial stove island in the center of the kitchen. The hissing sound was audible now, a steady, lethal stream of gas pumping into the air. All 6 burners were turned to the maximum release position, but there was no flame. Panic seized my throat. I reached out to grab the knobs to twist them off, but my hands were shaking. My mind raced to the windows. They were shut tight. I needed to open them. I needed to turn on the exhaust fan. My hand flew to the wall switch for the overhead lights and the ventilation system. Suddenly, a hand clamped around my wrist. The grip was strong, bone-crushing. I gasped, spinning around, ready to scream. My stepson Leo was standing there. He was not in his wheelchair. He was not dragging his legs. He was standing on his own 2 feet, towering over me in the darkness of the kitchen, his face pale and serious. "Do not touch that switch," Leo whispered, his voice raspy but terrifyingly calm. I stared at him, my brain unable to process the image. Leo, who I had lifted in and out of the bath for 2 years. Leo, who had not felt sensation below the waist since the car accident. Leo was standing. "Do not turn on the lights," he repeated, tightening his grip on my wrist. "Do not use your cell phone. Do not open the electric blinds." "Leo," I stammered, choking on the fumes. "What is happening? You are standing." Dad rigged the light switch to a spark igniter. Leo said, his eyes darting to the wall plate I had almost touched. "And he blocked the vents. He wants the house to explode. He wants us to burn Sarah. You might think this is a heartwarming story about a miracle recovery where a boy walks again. It is not. This is the story of how I survived the night my husband tried to incinerate us for an insurance payout, and how I spent the next 48 hours dismantling his entire existence with the same cold precision he used to plan our deaths. If you want to see a woman take back her power and destroy a monster, hit that subscribe button right now. I stood frozen in the dark kitchen, the hissing of the gas filling the space between us. My reality was fracturing. The boy I thought was helpless was currently the only thing standing between me and a fiery death. "We have to get out," I whispered, grabbing his shoulder. The shock of feeling his solid standing frame under my hand sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through me. "We have to leave the house." "No," Leo hissed. "The electric gate is wired too. If you try to open it from the panel, it sparks. If we open the garage door, it triggers." He thought of everything. Leo released my wrist and dropped to the floor. He did not fall. He moved with the agility of an athlete. He slid under the massive kitchen island, pushing aside the heavy pots and pans I rarely used. "What are you doing?" I asked, coughing into my sleeve. The fumes were getting heavier, making my head spin. "There is a manual shut-off valve back here," Leo said, his voice echoing from under the cabinets. "I saw the plumber use it last year." A moment later, I heard a grunt of effort, followed by the screech of metal on metal. Then silence. The hissing stopped. Leo crawled back out, dusting off his pajama knees. He stood up again, looking at me in the moonlight that filtered through the high transom windows, the only windows David had not been able to reach to seal shut. "It is off," Leo said. "But the gas is still trapped in here. We need to open the sliding doors manually. Do not use the button. We have to break the lock mechanism." I nodded, my mind finally catching up to the survival instinct. I grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the rack. Leo and I moved to the glass doors leading to the patio. With one synchronized strike, I smashed the latch handle. It broke free. We slid the heavy glass door open and stumbled out into the cool night air of the backyard. I collapsed onto the patio furniture, gasping for clean oxygen. My lungs burned. I looked up at the house, my beautiful multi-million-dollar sanctuary that had almost become my crematorium. Then I looked at Leo. He was sitting on the edge of a lounger, rubbing his legs. He looked guilty. He looked terrified. "Leo," I said, my voice trembling, not with fear anymore, but with a dawning, icy realization. "You can walk." He looked down at his feet. "Yes." "For how long?" "6 months," he whispered. I felt the blood drain from my face. 6 months. For 6 months I had been paying exorbitant medical bills. I had been funding trips to specialists. I had been carrying him, bathing him, organizing my entire life around his disability. Why, I asked, the word coming out like a shard of glass. Why did you let me do all that? Why did you let me think you were broken? Leo looked up and I saw tears tracking down his face. "Because Dad said you would kick us out." I stared at him. "What?" "Dad said you only married him because you felt sorry for us." Leo said, his words spilling out fast now. "He said you hated having a kid around. He said the only reason you let us stay in this big house was because I was crippled. He told me that if I ever got better, if I ever walked, you would file for divorce and throw us on the street. He said we have nowhere else to go." The air around me felt colder than the Connecticut night. "He gives me injections." Leo continued, rolling up his pajama sleeve to reveal bruised puncture marks on his arm. "Before every doctor visit. Before every time you come home early. He calls it vitamins, but I looked it up. It is a muscle relaxer. It makes my legs dead weight so I cannot move even if I try. But I stopped taking them. I pretend to swallow them and spit them out. My hands clenched into fists on my lap. The nails dug into my palms so hard it hurt, but the pain helped me focus. David, my husband, the man who claimed to be a struggling entrepreneur when we met, the man I had lifted out of debt, the man who cried on my shoulder about his poor tragic son. He had not just tried to kill me tonight. He had been psychologically torturing his own child for money. He had turned me into the villain in Leo's eyes to keep the boy complicit in his own abuse. Every memory of the last 2 years replayed in my mind with a new, sickening filter. David insisting he take Leo to therapy alone. David asking for cash for treatments because the specialist did not take insurance. David asking me to sign the new life insurance policy last week because he was worried about what would happen to Leo if I died. It was never about love. It was a long con. And tonight was supposed to be the cash out. I looked at Leo. He was trembling, waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to confirm the lie his father had planted, that I was a monster who would discard him the moment he was inconvenient. I stood up. I walked over to him and knelt down, ignoring the grass stains on my white trousers. I took his hands. They were cold. Leo looked at me. He raised his eyes, flinching slightly. "Your father is a liar," I said, my voice steady, devoid of the hysteria that had consumed me minutes ago. "I do not hate you. I have never hated you. And this house is not his. It is mine." Leo blinked, confused. "But Dad said he pays the mortgage. He said he lets you live here because you handle the bills." I almost laughed. A dark, humorless sound. Of course David told him that. David needed to be the hero even while he was the parasite. Leo the First said softly, "Your father has not paid a bill in 3 years. I bought this house. I bought the car he drove away in. I pay for the food, the clothes, and the insurance policy he is trying to collect on tonight." I saw the world shift in the boy's eyes. The fear was replaced by confusion, and then slowly by a simmering anger. "He tried to kill us," Leo whispered. "He packed a bag. He took his passport. I saw it in the glove box when he was loading the car. He is not coming back, Sarah. He thinks we are going to be ash by morning." I stood up and looked back at the dark, silent house. Inside, the gas was slowly dissipating, but the evidence remained. The rigged switch, the blocked vents. David was probably on the highway now, driving toward the casino or a hotel to establish his alibi. He would be checking his watch, waiting for the notification that the fire alarm system had gone offline, waiting for the call from the police telling him his tragic wife and disabled son had perished in a terrible accident. He wanted a tragedy. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My thumb hovered over 911. Then I stopped. If I called the police now, what would happen? They would find the gas. They might find the rigged switch. David would be arrested. He would claim it was an accident, or he would blame Leo. He would say the boy was mentally unstable, traumatized. He would use the money I gave him to hire a shark lawyer. He might get a few years for attempted arson. Maybe less. And I would be the pitiable widow who almost died. No, that was not enough. For the abuse he inflicted on this child, for the 2 years of lies, for the muscle relaxers, for the gas filling my kitchen. I did not just want him in handcuffs. I wanted him destroyed. I wanted him to lose the money, the reputation, the freedom, and the ego he valued above human life. I lowered the phone. "Leo," I said, turning back to him, "can you walk without pain?" "Yes," he said. "Good, because we have a lot of work to do before the sun comes up. I need you to tell me everything, Leo. Every lie he told you, every time he drugged you, every account password you saw him type. Can you do that?" Leo nodded, his jaw set in a hard line. He looked like a soldier ready for war. "I am not calling the police yet," I told him. "Why?" he asked. "Because he thinks we are dead," I said, feeling that eerie calm settle over me like a suit of armor. "And we are going to let him believe that until he walks into the trap I am about to build." I looked at the burner phone Leo had pulled from his pocket, a secret device David did not know about. "Do you know how to use a VPN?" I asked the 14-year-old. Leo smirked, a glimpse of the brilliant kid hidden under the trauma. "I hacked the school firewall last month." "Excellent," I said. I unlocked my phone and dialed the one number David would never expect me to call. My brother-in-law, Marcus, the best criminal defense attorney in New York and a man who had hated David from the moment they met. The line rang twice. Sarah Marcus answered, his voice thick with sleep. "It is 2 a.m. Is everything okay?" "Marcus," I said, staring at the dark silhouette of my house, "I need you to come to the estate. Bring your evidence kit, and do not park in the driveway." "Why? What is going on?" "David just tried to murder us," I said. "And Marcus?" "Yeah, I am going to ruin him." I hung up the phone. The night was quiet, but the war had just begun. David Vance had left a paralyzed boy and a trophy wife to die. He was about to find out that he had actually left a computer genius and a financial executioner with nothing left to lose. The night air on the patio was cooling rapidly, but the heat of adrenaline kept me sweating. I looked at Leo, who was crouching behind a large potted fern near the sliding glass doors. The house loomed above us, dark and silent, a massive structure of stone and glass that I had paid for with years of 80-hour work weeks. Now it was a surveillance box. "We cannot just walk back in," I whispered, crouching beside him. "If he checks the feed and sees us walking around, he will know the gas did not work. He will come back to finish the job before I can build the case against him." Leo pointed a shaking finger toward the ceiling corner of the living room visible through the glass. "The camera is there," he said softly, "and there is another one in the hallway, and one pointing at the staircase. They are motion activated. If we walk upright, the sensors will trigger a notification to his phone. He will see a clip of us alive." "So we stay low," I said. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide. "You want to crawl?" I looked at my white trousers already grass-stained and then at the marble floors inside. I want to survive, Leo, and I want to know exactly what is on his computer before Marcus gets here. We slipped back through the broken sliding door. The smell of gas had dissipated enough to be breathable, though the chemical taint of sulfur still clung to the curtains. I dropped to my hands and knees on the cold marble. It was a humiliating position. I was Sarah Vance, a woman who commanded boardrooms, a woman who made CEOs sweat during pitch meetings, and here I was crawling like an insect across the floor of my own home to avoid being murdered by my husband. "Stay against the wall," Leo whispered, taking the lead. He moved with a surprising fluidity. I realized then that while I had been working, Leo had been living in this war zone, learning the angles, mapping the blind spots of his father's surveillance. He was the expert here. I was just the tourist. We shimmied past the kitchen island, the cold stone pressing against my palms. Above us, the little red light of the camera blinked rhythmically. It was recording the empty room, waiting for a ghost. I held my breath, dragging my body inch by inch, feeling the absurdity and the terror intertwined. We reached the hallway. The runner rug provided some cushion for my knees, but the space was tighter here. "Wait!" Leo hissed, freezing in place. I stopped my face inches from his sneakers. "The camera on the stairs pans," he whispered. Left to right. 10-second intervals. We waited. I counted the seconds in my head, my heart thumping against the floorboards. 1, 2, 3. I imagined David sitting in a hotel room, sipping scotch, waiting for his phone to ping with a fire alarm alert. The sheer arrogance of the man. He thought he had planned the perfect crime, but he had underestimated the two people he deemed weakest. Now, Leo signaled. We scrambled across the open foyer, staying below the sightline of the sweeping lens. We made it to the heavy oak doors of David's study. It was locked, of course. David always kept his office locked. He claimed it was to protect sensitive client data, but I knew now it was to protect his lies. I reached up and tried the handle. Locked. "I have a key," I whispered, reaching for the spare set I kept hidden in a hollowed-out book in the library console table nearby. I stayed low, reaching up blindly until my fingers brushed the spine of the fake Dickens novel. I pulled the key out and handed it to Leo. He unlocked the door with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. We crawled inside and pushed the door shut behind us with our feet. Only then did we dare to sit up. The study smelled like him. Sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and that underlying scent of old paper. It was a room I rarely entered. He had always made me feel like I was intruding on his genius whenever I stepped in here. I stood up, my knees cracking, and walked over to his massive mahogany desk. "Boot it up," I told Leo, pointing to the iMac. Leo sat in the leather chair that was far too big for him. He woke the computer. A password prompt appeared. "Do you know it?" Leo asked. I stared at the screen. David was a narcissist. His passwords would never be random. They would be about him. "Try his birthday," I said. Leo typed, "Incorrect." "Try the date he founded his company," I suggested. Leo typed again, "Incorrect." I paused, thinking about the man I thought I knew. He loved money. He loved the appearance of success. "Try this," I said, leaning over Leo's shoulder. "Type MERCEDES S550, the car I bought him, the symbol of the status he didn't earn." Leo typed it in. The screen unlocked. I felt a surge of bitter vindication. He was so predictable. "Okay," I said, taking over the mouse. "I need to know where he really is." He said Chicago. He said he had a meeting with a biotech firm at 8 in the morning. I opened his browser. His history was not cleared. Another sign of his arrogance. He didn't think anyone would ever look at this computer again because he thought it would be melted slag by morning. I clicked on his email first. There were no flight confirmations to O'Hare. There were no calendar invites for a biotech meeting. There, Leo pointed at the screen. The confirmation email from yesterday. I opened it. It was a reservation confirmation, not for a hotel in Chicago, the Borgata Hotel and Casino, Atlantic City, New Jersey. "He is not in Chicago," I whispered, staring at the screen. "He is in New Jersey. That is a 2-hour drive. He is building an alibi." Leo said, his voice hard. "If the house explodes, he needs to be seen on camera somewhere else." A casino is perfect. There are cameras everywhere. He will make sure he is seen at the poker table at the exact moment the fire starts. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. He was close enough to drive back in the morning and play the grieving husband, but far enough to be medically ruled out as the arsonist. Let's see what he is doing with the money, I said, clicking on his bank tabs. I opened the accounts for his startup, Vance Innovations. I had seeded this account with $200,000 6 months ago. Balance zero. I checked the transaction history. Withdrawals, massive ones. The Borgata, Mohegan Sun, Foxwoods, online betting sites. He gambled it all, I said, the realization washing over me. Every penny I gave him for his business, every check I wrote for Leo's treatments that he said he would deposit. It is all gone. He did not just spend it, Leo said quietly. Look at the dates. I looked closer. The withdrawals accelerated in the last 3 months. He was chasing his losses. He was in a hole so deep he could not climb out. That is why he needs the reset, I said. He needs the insurance money to cover the debt before the sharks come for him. I opened his personal folder on the desktop. There was a subfolder named Docs. Inside there were 2 PDF files created last week. My hand hovered over the mouse. I knew what they were before I opened them, but seeing them was necessary. I needed the evidence to burn into my retinas. I double-clicked the first file. Term life insurance policy, Sarah Vance. I scrolled down to the coverage amount, $10 million. I scrolled to the beneficiary section, David Vance, 100%. I scrolled to the signature page. There was my signature, a perfect forgery. I remembered him asking me to sign a permission slip for Leo's school trip last week. He must have traced it or used a digital lift. He valued my life at $10 million, I said, my voice flat. That is the price tag he put on his wife. Open the other one, Leo said. I clicked the second file. Homeowners insurance policy update. He had increased the fire coverage on the estate just 4 days ago. He had added a specific rider for accidental combustion and gas line failure. He planned this down to the fine print, I said. He didn't just decide to kill us on a whim. He has been planning this for weeks. He sat across the dinner table from us eating the food I cooked, asking about my day, all while calculating exactly how much he would get paid if I burned to death in my sleep. I pulled out a flash drive from my pocket. I always carried one, a habit of my trade. I plugged it into the back of the iMac. Copy everything I told Leo, the browser history, the bank statements, the insurance PDFs, the emails with the casino, everything. Leo's fingers flew across the keyboard. He was faster than me. He dragged the folders, bypassing the system warnings. While the progress bar loaded, I looked around the room. On the shelf, there was a framed photo of us from our wedding day 3 years ago. David looked handsome, dapper in his tuxedo, smiling that winning smile that had charmed my parents and my friends. I looked radiant, so full of hope, so happy to have found a partner who seemed to love me, not for my portfolio. I walked over to the shelf and picked up the photo. Sarah, Leo said, warning in his voice, "Don't break it. He will notice." "I know," I said. I looked at the glass. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to scream until my throat bled, but I couldn't, not yet. I carefully placed the photo back exactly as it was. "Done," Leo said, pulling the flash drive out. "We have it. We need to clear the recent activity," I said. "He cannot know we were on the computer." Leo nodded. He opened the terminal command. He wiped the last opened logs and reset the system clock to hide the login time. He was brilliant. A 14-year-old boy who should have been playing video games was instead covering our tracks at a crime scene. We crawled back out of the office, locking the door behind us with the spare key. We returned the key to the hollowed-out book. We moved back across the foyer, timing our movements with the panning camera sliding like ghosts through the house that was supposed to be our tomb. When we finally made it back to the kitchen, crouching behind the island, I looked at the flash drive in my hand. It felt heavy, like it contained the weight of the world. "We have the motive," I whispered to Leo. "We have the proof of the fraud. We have his location." "But it is not enough," Leo said. "He is smart, Sarah. He will say he didn't know about the gas. He will say the insurance was just prudent financial planning. He will say the signature is real. He will say he has a gambling problem, but that doesn't make him a murderer. If we go to the police now with just this, he might get bail. I looked at the boy. He was right. David was a manipulator. He could charm a jury. He could twist the narrative. He could claim I was the one who was unstable, that I framed him. You are right, I said. We need more. We need a confession. Or we need to catch him in the act of celebrating our deaths. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. I pulled it out, shielding the screen light with my palm. It was a text from Marcus. I am at the perimeter, disabling the external gate sensors now. Meet me at the back service entrance in 2 minutes. Do not turn on any lights. I looked at Leo. Marcus is here, I said. Leo let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 2 years. Let's go, I said. We moved toward the service door, staying low. As I crawled, I clutched the flash drive tighter. David was currently sitting at a blackjack table in Atlantic City, likely ordering a drink, checking his watch, waiting for the news that would make him a rich man. He had no idea that the wife he thought was asleep and the son he thought was crippled were currently armed with his entire digital life. He had bet everything on red. But the house, my house, was about to win. The burner phone felt small and cheap in my hand, a sharp contrast to the sleek smartphone David tracked my every move with. Leo had pulled it from a hollowed-out space in the foam cushion of his wheelchair. He told me he had bought it with cash 3 months ago from a kid at school, anticipating a day when he might need to call for help without his father knowing. I looked at the device, a relic of a simpler time, and felt a surge of gratitude for this boy who had been playing a survival game while I was busy playing house. I dialed the number from memory. It was the only number I knew by heart that David did not monitor. Marcus picked up on the second ring. His voice was deep, groggy with sleep, but instantly alert the moment he heard my breathing. Sarah, he said, it is 2 a.m. Marcus, I said, keeping my voice low, I need you to come to the estate. Do not use the main gate. Park a mile down the road and walk the perimeter trail. Come to the service entrance. There was a pause. The silence of a man who spent 20 years as a federal prosecutor processing the tone of a witness in distress. Is David there? He asked. No, I said, but his cameras are. And Marcus, bring your mobile forensic kit. I did not have to say anything else. Marcus was family. He was married to my older sister, and he had been the one who warned me about David 3 years ago. He had looked at David at our engagement party and told me that man had eyes that did not smile. I had dismissed him then. I was not dismissing him now. I hung up and looked at Leo. We sat in the dark mudroom by the back door, waiting. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every creak of the settling foundation sounded like a footstep. 20 minutes later, the keypad on the service door beeped softly. The light turned green. Marcus had bypassed the code. The door opened, and a gust of cool night air swept in, followed by the imposing figure of my brother-in-law. Marcus was a large man over 6 feet tall, with the broad shoulders of a former linebacker and the sharp, intelligent eyes of a shark in a suit. Even in a dark tracksuit and a baseball cap, he commanded the room. He stepped inside and immediately stopped. He sniffed the air. Gas, he said. It is off now, I said. He looked at me, then down at Leo standing beside me. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of the boy on his feet, but he did not comment. He was a professional. He absorbed facts first and processed emotions later. Where is he? Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous. Atlantic City, I replied, establishing an alibi. Marcus dropped his heavy duffel bag on the bench. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I am calling the state police. I know the captain in this district. We get a patrol car here, we document the gas valve, we pull the logs. We pick David up at the casino for attempted murder. No, I said. The word hung in the air, sharp and absolute. Marcus stopped dialing. He looked at me, his brow furrowed. Sarah, he tried to kill you. This is not a negotiation. This is a crime scene. If you call the police now, he wins, I said, stepping closer to him. Marcus laughed, a short disbelief sound. He wins. He goes to prison. Sarah, for what I asked, attempted arson, reckless endangerment, For attempted murder, Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. Prove it. I challenged him. Marcus pointed at the kitchen. The gas. The rigged switch. Circumstantial, I said, channeling every ounce of cold logic I had learned in the boardroom. David will say he has no idea how the switch got rigged. He will say the house is old. He will hire the best defense team in the state using my money. And you know what his defense will be. I pointed at Leo. He will blame the boy, I said. Marcus looked at Leo, then back at me. He will say Leo is unstable. I continued, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. He will say Leo is traumatized from the accident, depressed, maybe suicidal. He will say he left for a business trip, and Leo tried to hurt himself and take me with him. It will be his word against a paralyzed boy with a history of trauma. And because David is charming and white and looks like a grieving father, the jury might just believe him. Or at least they will have reasonable doubt. Marcus stared at me. He knew I was right. He had seen it happen in courtrooms 1,000 times. Rich men with good suits and sob stories walking free while the victims were put on trial. And even if he gets convicted, I added, stepping into his space, what does he get? 10 years out and 5 for good behavior. He comes out, writes a book about his tragic life, and moves on. I took a breath. No, Marcus, I do not want him to just go to jail. I want him erased. Marcus lowered his hand, the phone screen going dark. What do you want, Sarah? I want him to lose the one thing he loves more than his freedom, I said. I want him to lose the money, all of it. I want him to be humiliated. I want him to be exposed as a fraud so toxic that no bank will ever open an account for him again. I want federal charges, wire fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft. I want the IRS, the FBI, and the SEC to descend on him all at once. I want him buried under so much litigation that he never sees the sun again. Marcus looked at me for a long time. He saw the change in me. The Sarah who used to host garden parties and worry about tablecloth colors was gone. In her place was a woman who had looked death in the face and decided to hit back harder. He looked at Leo. You okay with this, son? Leo looked up, his face grim. He drugged me, Marcus, for 2 years. He made me think I was broken so he could cash checks. Marcus's jaw tightened. The veins in his neck stood out. The protective uncle in him wanted to drive to Atlantic City and tear David apart with his bare hands, but the lawyer in him took the wheel. Okay, Marcus said, exhaling slowly. We do it your way. But if we do this, we have to be perfect. One slip up, and he walks. Or worse, he finishes what he started. I handed him the flash drive Leo and I had filled. We have his browser history, I said. The insurance policies. The bank transfers. He forged my signature on a $10 million policy last week. Marcus took the drive, weighing it in his hand. That is a start. But for a federal RICO case or major fraud, we need to trace the money. We need to prove he didn't just spend it, but that he laundered it or obtained it through wire fraud schemes. I can get you access to the main servers, I said. But you need to do the forensic accounting. You need to build the paper trail that proves premeditation. Marcus nodded, walking over to the kitchen island. He opened his duffel bag and pulled out a laptop and a signal jammer. I will clone his hard drive remotely if Leo can get me the IP bridge, Marcus said. We will map every dollar he stole. But Sarah, the law is only half of this. I know, I said. You have to act, Marcus said, looking me dead in the eye. He is going to come back here. He is going to expect to see fire trucks and coroners. Instead, he is going to find you making breakfast. I can do it, I said. He is going to be terrified, Marcus warned. And a terrified narcissist is dangerous. He will try to find out why the gas didn't ignite. He will be watching you for any sign that you know. You have to be the loving, oblivious wife. You have to kiss him. You have to sleep in the same bed as him. Can you do that? I thought about David's hands on me. I thought about the wet, fake tears in his eyes when he left. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I will be the performance of a lifetime, I said. Good, Marcus said. He began typing on his laptop, the blue light illuminating his focused face. Here's the plan. I am going to set up a mirror server. Every email he sends, every text he types comes to me first. We are going to let him think he is safe. We are going to let him think he got away with the gambling debt. And then we trigger the cross default, I said. I have a clause in the trust fund agreement. If he is found to be insolvent or involved in any criminal investigation, the loans I backed are called in immediately. Marcus smiled a cold, sharp smile. You really are your father's daughter. We worked through the night. The kitchen, once a gas chamber, became our war room. Leo sat with Marcus, helping him bypass the dual authentication on David's hidden offshore accounts. I watched them, 2 generations of victims turning into hunters. Leo is a genius, Marcus muttered after an hour. He just cracked a shell company in the Cayman Islands in 5 minutes. He had a lot of time to study while he was stuck in that chair, I said quietly. By 4 a.m, we had the picture. It was worse than I thought. David wasn't just gambling. He was paying blackmail money to a loan shark in Philadelphia. He had leveraged the house, my house, using a forged power of attorney. If I had died tonight, the insurance money wouldn't have just made him rich. It would have saved him from having his legs broken. We have enough to bury him, Marcus said, closing the laptop. But we need the finale. We need him to confess or commit an overt act in public. The gala, I said. What? The charity gala on Saturday, I said. Hope for Mobility. My company is sponsoring it. David insisted we go. He wants to parade Leo around to solicit donations for his fake medical foundation. Marcus nodded slowly. A public venue. High stakes. Cameras everywhere. He plans to launch a new investment round there, I said. He thinks he will be the grieving widower by then, or if not the devoted father. Let him launch it, Marcus said. Let him get up on that stage. Let him think he has won, and then we take it all away. Marcus packed up his gear as the first gray light of dawn began to touch the windows. I have to go, he said. If he checks the perimeter cameras and sees my car anywhere near here, he will panic. He put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was heavy and reassuring. You are sure about this, Sarah. Once we start this, there is no going back. You are going to be living with a shark in the tank for 48 hours. I looked at the stove. I looked at the spot where Leo had stood up and saved my life. He is not the shark, Marcus, I said, my voice completely devoid of fear. I am, Marcus nodded. He turned to Leo. Back in the chair, kid. You know the drill. Leo sighed, the exhaustion finally hitting him. He walked over to the wheelchair he had abandoned hours ago. He sat down, and I watched his posture slump. He let his legs go limp. He adjusted his face, letting the intelligence drain away, replacing it with the vacant, pained look of a child who had given up. It broke my heart to see it, but I knew it was the last time he would ever have to do it. Marcus slipped out the back door, disappearing into the morning mist. I locked the door. I wiped the handle. I checked the floor for any mud Marcus might have tracked in. Then I went to the kitchen. I filled the kettle. I set out 2 mugs. I opened the windows to let the morning breeze clear the last faint trace of sulfur. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I stripped off my clothes, smelling the gas and sweat on them. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it was pink. I put on my silk robe. I brushed my hair. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. At 6:30 in the morning, I heard the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway, the heavy thud of a car door, the beep of the alarm. The front door opened. Sarah David's voice floated up the stairs. It was tentative, shaky. He was calling out to a corpse. I took a deep breath. I put a smile on my face, a sleepy, loving, oblivious smile. I am up here, darling, I called back. You are home early. I heard his footsteps pause. I could feel his confusion vibrating through the floorboards. He was alive. She was alive. The house was standing. Then the footsteps resumed faster this time, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I stood up to greet my husband. The game was on. The digital clock on the bedside table read 2:12 in the morning. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the last few hours. The smell of gas was gone, replaced by the faint scent of the lavender room spray I had used to mask the evidence. I sat propped up against the velvet headboard of my bed, my heart beating with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Leo was in the corner of the room, slumped in his wheelchair. He was not sleeping, though he looked like it. He was watching me, his eyes sharp and alert in the dim light. We were actors on a stage waiting for the curtain to rise. The phone sat on the nightstand. It was face up. We were waiting for it to light up. He will call. I had told Leo 10 minutes ago. He needs to know. He is sitting there in that casino watching the news, refreshing his feed, waiting for a report of a gas explosion in Connecticut. When he does not see it, panic will set in. He will need to check. And then it happened. The screen lit up. The vibration hummed against the wood of the table. David. I let it ring. 1. He is sweating right now, I whispered to Leo. 2. He is praying I do not pick up. He wants this to go to voicemail so he can play the recording for the police later, sobbing about how he tried to call his wife one last time. 3. I reached out and picked up the phone. I cleared my throat, pitching my voice to the perfect register of a woman being woken from a deep, peaceful slumber. I slid my finger across the screen to answer. "Hello," I said. My voice was raspy, heavy with sleep. There was silence on the other end. Dead silence. For a second, I could hear the background noise of his location, the chime of slot machines, the murmur of a crowd, the distinct chaotic sound of a casino floor. "David," I asked again, adding a touch of confusion, "is everything okay?" "Sarah." His voice was a croak. It sounded strangled. He sounded like a man who had just seen a ghost, which in a way he had. "You answered," he stammered. I frowned, channeling my confusion into the performance. "Of course I answered. You're calling me at 2 a.m. What is wrong? Are you okay? Where are you?" I shifted the phone so he could see my face. I had requested a FaceTime call immediately after answering, forcing him to look at me. I saw his face fill my screen. He looked terrible. He was standing in what looked like a quiet corner of the VIP lounge at the Borgata. The lighting was gold and dim, but it was bright enough for me to see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes were wide, darting around the frame, as if he was trying to look past me, trying to see if there were flames behind my head. In his hand he held a tumbler of amber liquid. His hand was shaking so badly the ice cubes were clinking against the glass. I am fine," David stuttered. I had a feeling. A bad feeling. A bad feeling," I repeated, rubbing my eyes theatrically. "About what?" "About the house," he said quickly. "About you. About Leo. I woke up from a nightmare. I dreamt something happened to the stove." I paused. It was a bold move. He was planting the seed of the accident he had engineered. He wanted me to go check the kitchen. He wanted me to walk into the gas cloud and flip the switch. He didn't know the gas was already gone. "The stove?" I asked, sounding perplexed. "David, the stove is fine. I made tea before I went to bed. Everything is off." "Are you sure?" He pressed, his voice rising in pitch. "Sarah, please, can you go check? I can't settle down until I know. It felt so real." I let out a soft, tired sigh. "David, I am not going downstairs. It is freezing. The alarm system is on. If there was a fire or a leak, the sensors would have tripped. You know how sensitive they are." I watched his face crumble. He knew exactly how sensitive they were because he had disabled them. Or at least he thought he had. The fact that I was lying here comfortable and alive meant that his mechanics had failed. But the sensors might be glitching, he said, desperation creeping in. "Sarah, please. Just for my peace of mind." I stared at him through the screen. This was the man who had kissed my forehead hours ago and left me to die. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I gave him a soft, reassuring smile. "You worry too much," I said. "That is why you are so stressed. The house is safe. We are safe." I saw his Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. He took a gulp of his drink, spilling a little on his cuff. "And Leo?" he asked. Is he okay?" He held his breath. I could see it. He was hoping that maybe, just maybe, the gas had leaked into the guest wing first. Maybe the boy was gone, even if I wasn't. I turned the camera. I pointed it toward the corner of the room where Leo sat in his wheelchair. Leo played his part perfectly. His head was lolled to the side, his mouth slightly open, his chest rising and falling in a deep, rhythmic cadence of sleep. He looked small, helpless, and entirely alive. "Look," I whispered. "He is sleeping like a baby." He had a good night, no spasms. I turned the camera back to me. David stared at the image of his son. He didn't look relieved. A father who thought his child was in danger would have cried with relief. David looked horrified. He looked like a man who had just watched his winning lottery ticket turn into dust. "He is asleep." David repeated, his voice hollow. "Sound asleep," I confirmed. "He misses you, though. He was sad you had to leave for Chicago." "Chicago." The lie hung between us. I knew he was in New Jersey. He knew he was in New Jersey. But he had to keep playing the role of the businessman on a trip. "Right," David said, blinking rapidly. "Chicago. The meeting." "You look tired, honey," I said, leaning into the camera. "You look really pale. Are you sure you are okay? Maybe you should go back to your hotel room and get some rest. You have that big presentation in the morning." David ran a hand through his hair. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was calculating. Why didn't it ignite? Did the pilot light fail? Did the timer break? He couldn't ask. He couldn't say a word. He was trapped in his own silence. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I should go. I just needed to hear your voice." "You are sweet," I said. "Do not worry about us. We will see you on Saturday for the gala." "Saturday," he echoed. "Right. The gala." "I love you, David," I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Yeah, me too." He didn't hang up immediately. He stared at me for one last second, searching my face for any sign that I knew. He was looking for anger, for fear, for suspicion. But I gave him nothing but the sleepy affection of a trophy wife. The screen went black. I lowered the phone to my lap. The room was silent again. Leo opened his eyes. He lifted his head off the headrest of the wheelchair. "He is terrified," Leo said. I looked at the blank screen of my phone. I have seen him angry. I have seen him arrogant. I have never seen him scared like that. "He thinks he messed up the wiring," Leo said. "He thinks it is his fault the bomb didn't go off." "Exactly," I said. "He is not suspicious of us. He is suspicious of his own competence. He is going to spend the next 2 days trying to figure out what went wrong. He will be distracted. He will be sloppy." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark driveway. "He is going to come back," I said. "He has to. He cannot blow up the house while he is inside it, so he has to come up with a plan B. He needs that insurance money, Leo. The gambling debts we saw on his computer are due. If he doesn't pay them, he is a dead man anyway." "So what do we do?" Leo asked, standing up from the chair and stretching his legs. "We wait," I said. "We let him come home. We let him think he has a second chance to fix his mistake." I turned back to the boy who had become my partner in this twisted game. "Go to bed, Leo. For real this time. You need your rest. Tomorrow we have to prepare the stage for the final act." Leo nodded. He walked toward the door, his steps silent and steady. "Sarah," he said, pausing at the threshold. "Yes, you are a really good actress." I looked at my reflection in the dark mirror of the vanity. I looked calm. I looked soft. I looked like a victim. "I am not acting." "Leo," I said, "I am hunting." Leo smiled a small, grim smile and disappeared into the hallway. I lay back down on the bed, but I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying David's face on the screen. The fear in his eyes was the most satisfying thing I had seen in years. But it was not enough. Fear fades. I needed him broken. I reached for my tablet and opened the encrypted messaging app Marcus had installed. "He called," I typed. "He bought it. He is panicking." A moment later, 3 dots appeared. "Good," Marcus replied. "I have the clone of his phone. I see his GPS. He is leaving the casino. He is driving north." "He is coming back?" "No," Marcus wrote. "He is stopping at a hardware store in Trenton, 24 hours open." My blood ran cold. "What is he buying?" "I don't know yet," Marcus replied. "But whatever it is, be ready. He is not giving up." I put the tablet down. David was buying new supplies. He was doubling down. Let him come, I thought, closing my eyes. Let him bring his matches, his wire cutters, his poisons. I had something far more dangerous waiting for him. I had the truth. And on Saturday night, under the crystal chandeliers of the gala, I was going to drop it on him like a guillotine. The sound of tires crunching on gravel usually signaled the end of a long day, a comfort that meant my husband was home. Now it sounded like the approach of a predator. I stood by the bay window in the master bedroom, watching through the sheer curtains as the silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway. It was 7 a.m. The sun was casting long, innocent shadows across the lawn, making the dew sparkle like diamonds. It was a picture-perfect morning in Connecticut, the kind of morning that belonged on a postcard, not in a crime thriller. David stepped out of the car. He did not look like the sharp, confident entrepreneur he pretended to be. He looked haggard. His dress shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his eyes were dark hollows in a pale face. He stood by the car door for a moment, staring up at the house. He was looking for soot. He was looking for shattered windows. He was looking for the black scorch marks of a tragedy. Instead, he saw the pristine white siding of the colonial estate I had paid for shining intact in the morning light. I could see the confusion ripple through his body. He slammed the car door, not with authority, but with frustration. He adjusted his jacket, took a deep breath, and began the walk to the front door. He was composing himself. He was putting on the mask of the loving husband returning from a canceled trip. I turned from the window. The curtain dropped. It was time for my performance. I checked my appearance in the mirror one last time. I wore a silk robe, my hair loose and soft around my shoulders. I had applied just enough blush to look flushed with sleep and enough concealer to hide the dark circles from a night spent hacking his bank accounts. I looked vulnerable. I looked like a woman who had no idea her life had been priced at $10 million. I went out into the hallway just as the front door opened. I called out, letting my voice carry a note of pleasant surprise. He froze in the foyer. He looked up at me standing at the top of the grand staircase. For a split second, I saw the flash of pure hatred in his eyes, the anger that I was still breathing. But it vanished instantly, replaced by a frantic, overwhelming relief that I knew was fake. "Sarah," he breathed out. He dropped his overnight bag and rushed up the stairs. He met me on the landing and pulled me into a hug. His grip was tight, desperate. He buried his face in my neck. He smelled of stale casino air, nervous sweat, and the mints he had eaten to cover the scent of scotch. "Thank God," he whispered against my skin. "Thank God you are okay." I stood stiffly for a moment, fighting the urge to shove him down the stairs. My skin crawled where he touched me. This was the man who had blocked the vents. This was the man who had rigged the switch. And now he was hugging me as if he hadn't spent the last 12 hours waiting for me to burn. I forced my arms to wrap around him. I patted his back. "David, you are shaking," I said softly, pulling back to look at him. "What is going on? Why are you back so early? I thought your meeting was at 8. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for any sign of suspicion. "The meeting, it got pushed," he lied, the words tumbling out. "And after we spoke last night, I just couldn't shake the feeling. The nightmare. I had to come home. I had to see you." "You are sweet," I said, reaching up to smooth the hair back from his forehead. "But we are fine. The house is fine." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I see that. I am so relieved." "And Leo?" he asked, his voice dropping. "Is he up yet?" "Not yet," I said. "He had a rough night with the spasms, but he finally fell asleep around 3. Do not wake him yet." David nodded, but his eyes drifted toward the guest wing. He needed to see the boy. He needed to confirm that his other liability was still intact. "I'm going to check on him," David said, "just to give him a kiss." I followed him. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the dangerous part. Leo had been walking, standing, and working with me all night. Now he had to go back to being the invalid David needed him to be. If Leo moved a muscle, if his legs showed any sign of the strength they had regained, David would know. David pushed open the door to Leo's room. The heavy curtains were drawn, keeping the room in a perpetual twilight. The air smelled of the medicinal ointment David insisted we use on Leo's legs, another part of the charade. Leo was lying in bed, the duvet pulled up to his chin. He looked small. David walked to the bedside. He stood over the boy. I watched his hand hover over Leo's face. For a terrifying second, I thought he might smother him. The pillow was right there. It would be so easy. A tragic complication of his condition, the doctors would say. But then Leo stirred. He opened his eyes, blinking groggily. "Dad," he whispered. "Hey, buddy," David said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Daddy's home." Leo looked at him. I saw the flash of revulsion in the boy's eyes, but he masked it instantly with a yawn. "You are back early." David sat on the edge of the bed. I watched the mattress dip. He placed a hand on Leo's leg right over the thigh muscle that was now strong enough to run a mile. He squeezed. I held my breath. If David felt the tone, the muscle definition that hadn't been there 6 months ago, the game was over. But Leo's legs remained limp. He had practiced this. He knew how to relax every fiber, how to make himself dead weight. "How are the legs today?" David asked, squeezing harder. "Hurt," Leo mumbled. "Can't feel them much." David sighed. A sound that pretended to be sympathy, but was actually relief. Good. The boy was still broken. The boy was still a prop. "I need to get up," Leo said. "Bathroom. I will take you," David said immediately. He needed to perform the role of the martyr father. He stood up and pulled the covers back. I watched as my husband bent down and slid his arms under the knees and back of the son he had tried to kill. He lifted Leo. It was a grotesque pieta. Leo let his head loll against David's shoulder, his legs dangling uselessly. I saw Leo's hand clench into a fist behind David's back, his knuckles white. He wanted to strangle him. I could see the tension in the boy's neck. "Relax, Leo," I thought. "Do not fight him. Be the burden he thinks you are." David carried him to the wheelchair in the corner and lowered him down. He adjusted the footrests. He strapped the belt across Leo's waist, a belt Leo didn't need anymore. "There you go, sport," David said, patting his cheek. I stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, my arms crossed. "You are such a good father, David," I said. David turned to look at me. The praise fed his ego as I knew it would. He stood up straighter. "I do what I have to do, Sarah. Family is everything." I felt bile rise in my throat. I smiled. "Why don't you get cleaned up?" I said. "You look like you slept in your clothes. I will go down and make us some breakfast." "Coffee, please," David said. "I need something strong." I turned and walked away before my face could betray me. I headed down the stairs, listening to the heavy tread of David following me. He wasn't going to shower yet. I knew him. He was going to the kitchen. He needed to see the stove. I walked into the kitchen, the scene of the crime. The morning light flooded the space, bouncing off the stainless steel appliances. I went to the coffee maker and started the brew. David entered a moment later. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the island. His eyes were glued to the massive wolf range. He walked around the perimeter, his hand trailing along the granite countertop. He stopped in front of the burners. He reached out and touched a knob. I watched him from the corner of my eye as I poured water into the reservoir. He was checking the position. They were all in the off position. He frowned. He leaned in closer, sniffing. He was looking for the leak. He was trying to figure out why the spark hadn't ignited the gas he had left running. I turned around, holding a bag of coffee beans. "What are you doing?" I asked innocently. David jumped. He pulled his hand back as if the stove burned him. Nothing, he said quickly. "Just checking the pilot light. It smelled a little funny in here." "Oh, that," I said, pouring the beans into the grinder. The noise of the machine filled the silence for a moment, covering the sound of my heart pounding. When the grinding stopped, I continued, my voice casual. "Marcus stopped by last night." David froze. The color drained from his face completely. "Marcus," he repeated. "Your brother-in-law, Marcus." "Why?" "Oh. Eleanor needed those old fabric swatches I had in the attic for her renovation project," I said, measuring out the grounds. "She couldn't come, so she sent Marcus. He came in through the back service door around 9. David's hands gripped the edge of the island. 9 o'clock. That was an hour after David had left. That was when the gas should have been filling the room. And David asked, his voice tight. "Well, it was so strange," I said, turning to face him, leaning back against the counter with a mug in my hand. He walked in and said it smelled like gas. I couldn't smell anything, you know. My allergies have been acting up. But Marcus was adamant. He went over to the stove and saw that the knobs were turned slightly. Not all the way, just enough to leak a little. I watched David's eyes widen. He was processing this. He had turned them all the way. Marcus must have turned them off. So he turned them off? David asked, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, I said, blowing on my hot coffee. He turned them off and opened the window for a bit. He lectured me for 10 minutes about checking the knobs after cleaning. I must have bumped them when I was wiping down the counters after dinner. Clumsy me. I laughed a light, self-deprecating sound. David let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He sagged against the counter. It was an accident. That was what he was thinking. I could see the thoughts scrolling across his face like a news ticker. Sarah didn't find the trap. Sarah didn't know it was a trap. Sarah thought she bumped the knobs. Marcus, that meddling lawyer, had just happened to come by and fix it. It was bad luck for David, but it wasn't a discovery. He wasn't caught. He was just thwarted by coincidence. Wow, David said, rubbing his face with his hands. That is lucky, isn't it? I said, taking a sip. Imagine if he hadn't come by. We could have gotten sick. Or worse, David muttered. What? Nothing, he said, straightening up. His demeanor changed instantly. The fear evaporated, replaced by a renewed arrogance. He had dodged a bullet. He was safe. He could try again. I am just glad you are safe, he said, walking over to me. He put his hands on my waist. I stood there, letting him hold me. I looked up at him. You really need a shower, honey. We have the gala tomorrow night. You need to look your best if you want to charm those investors for Leo's foundation. You are right, he said, kissing my cheek. He felt confident now. He felt in control again. I will go shower. Here, let me take your coat, I said, my hands moving to the lapels of his expensive wool trench coat. It smells like smoke. I will have the housekeeper steam it. David shrugged it off, careless in his relief. Thanks, babe. You are the best. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, whistling a low, tuneless melody. He was happy. He was already planning his next move. I stood in the kitchen holding his heavy coat. I waited until I heard his footsteps hit the top of the stairs. I waited until I heard the distant sound of the shower turning on in the master bath. I reached into the pocket of my robe. I pulled out the device Marcus had given me. It was small, no bigger than a button, flat and black. I turned the coat over. I found the small opening in the lining of the inner pocket, a tear that David had been meaning to get fixed for months. I slid the device inside, pushing it deep into the hem of the coat where it would sit unnoticed, recording every word, every breath, every lie. I walked to the mudroom and hung the coat on the rack. He thought he was lucky. He thought Marcus had saved me by accident. He didn't know that Marcus hadn't been here last night at all. He didn't know that the clumsy wife he just kissed had dismantled his bomb with her own hands. I went back to the coffee pot and poured a second cup. I took it black. I needed the bitterness. David was upstairs washing away the guilt. He would come down soon, refreshed, ready to play the role of the devoted husband at the gala. He would try to secure the funding for his fake company. He would try to secure the future he thought he deserved. But he was wearing a wire now, and tomorrow night at the Hope for Mobility Gala, in front of the city's elite, in front of the cameras he loved so much, I wasn't just going to divorce him. I was going to detonate him. Leo rolled into the kitchen then. The sound of his wheels on the tile was soft. He looked at me, his eyes asking the question. He bought it, I said quietly. He thinks it was an accident. Leo nodded. He looked at the coat hanging in the mudroom. And the bug. It is in, I said. Leo smiled. It was a cold smile, one that mirrored my own. Make him pancakes, Leo said. He loves pancakes. I laughed. It was a dry, dark sound. I will make him a feast, Leo. It is his last meal as a free man. I opened the pantry door. I took out the flour. I took out the eggs. I began to whisk the batter, the rhythmic sound filling the kitchen that should have been a crater. I am Sarah Vance. I am 34 years old, and I am done being the victim. David Vance came home to check for a body. Instead, he found a wife making breakfast. He has no idea that the real fire is just getting started. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black ties and designer gowns illuminated by crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The banner hanging above the stage read, Hope for Mobility, in elegant gold script. It was the charity gala of the season, an event my venture capital firm had sponsored for 5 years running. In the past, this night had been a celebration of progress, a chance to fund research for spinal cord injuries. Tonight, however, it was a hunting ground. I stood at the entrance, the flashes of the press photographers blinding me as I stepped out of the limousine. David was right beside me, his hand firmly placed on the small of my back. To the cameras, it looked like a protective, loving gesture. To me, it felt like the barrel of a gun. He was guiding me, controlling the pace, ensuring that I played my role as the supportive wife to his tragic hero. Smile. Sarah, he whispered in my ear, his voice low and tight. The board of directors is watching. We need to look like a united front. I smiled. It was a practiced expression, one I had perfected over years of navigating boardrooms dominated by men who underestimated me. I tilted my head, catching the light, and waved to a colleague. Beside us, Leo sat in his wheelchair. He looked sharp in a fitted tuxedo, his hair gelled back, looking every bit the handsome heir to the Vance legacy. But his hands were gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly, his knuckles were white. David moved behind the wheelchair, taking ownership of the handles. This was his favorite prop. For 2 years, he had wheeled Leo into meetings, dinners, and parties, using the boy's paralysis as a conversation starter, a sympathy magnet, and a wallet opener. Tonight was the ultimate performance. We moved into the ballroom, the hum of conversation rising to greet us. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. David navigated the crowd with the precision of a shark moving through a school of fish. He wasn't interested in the hors d'oeuvres or the silent auction. He was scanning the room for targets. There, David murmured, spotting Arthur Sterling, one of the most conservative and wealthy angel investors in New York. He manages the pension funds. If I can get him on board, the rest will follow. I looked at David. He was sweating slightly despite the cool air conditioning. His desperation was a subtle cologne, detectable only to those who knew he was drowning in debt. He needed $5 million tonight. That was the buy-in for the fake biotech startup he had pitched to me weeks ago. He needed that money to pay off the loan sharks in Philadelphia, who were undoubtedly growing impatient. We approached Sterling. David plastered a look of humble determination on his face. "Mr. Sterling," David said, extending a hand, "it is an honor to see you again." Sterling turned, swirling his scotch. "Ah, David, and Sarah, good to see you. I heard about the breakthrough you are working on. Something about exoskeleton technology?" David nodded gravely. He stepped aside, revealing Leo in the chair. "This is my son, Leo," David said, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "He is the reason I wake up every morning. He is the reason I founded Vance Innovations. 2 years ago, a car accident took his legs. The doctor said he would never walk again. They said I should accept it." David paused for effect. He rested a hand on Leo's shoulder, squeezing it. I watched Leo flinch, a microscopic movement that only I caught. "But I cannot accept it." David continued, looking Sterling in the eye. "No father could. That is why I have poured every cent of my own money into developing a neural link suit that bypasses the spinal damage. We are close, Arthur. We are so close. But clinical trials are expensive." I stood there sipping my sparkling water, watching my husband lie with a fluidity that was almost impressive. There was no suit. There was no research. There was just a gambling addict who had tried to blow up his family to collect an insurance check, now using the survivor of that attempt to scam a stranger. Leo sat motionless. He had to. If he moved his legs now, if he stood up and screamed that his father was a fraud, David would spin it. He would say Leo was having a mental episode. He would say the trauma had made him delusional. We had to wait for the undeniable proof. Sterling looked down at Leo. He looked moved. Manipulative sociopaths like David were successful because they knew exactly which strings to pull. They weaponized empathy. "You are a good father," David Sterling said, nodding slowly. "It is rare to see that kind of dedication. What kind of round are you raising? We are looking for a lead investor for the Series A," David said quickly, too quickly. $5 million. It secures 10% equity and a seat on the board. but more importantly, it secures a future for kids like Leo. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. $5 million. That was the exact amount of the gambling debt combined with the hush money he owed. He wasn't raising capital. He was raising a getaway fund. And I knew his plan. I had seen the search history on his cloned phone. Non-extradition countries. Single-engine plane rentals. He planned to get the check from Sterling tonight. He would deposit it tomorrow morning. And then once the funds cleared, the accident at our house would finally happen properly. He would try again. He would kill me, kill Leo, collect the $10 million life insurance policy, and disappear to Brazil with $15 million in liquid assets. I was not just a wife to him. I was a piggy bank that he intended to smash open. Sarah Sterling said, turning to me, "You have a sharp eye for unicorns. You vouch for this technology." The trap tightened. David turned to me, his eyes wide and pleading. He needed my seal of approval. My reputation was the only thing giving him credibility in this room. If I hesitated, the deal died. If the deal died, the sharks would come for him, and he would become desperate and unpredictable. A desperate David might pull a gun right here in the ballroom. I looked at Sterling. Then I looked at David. "I believe that David is capable of things you cannot even imagine, Arthur," I said, my voice steady. "His commitment to changing his situation is absolute. I have never seen anyone more motivated." David exhaled. He took it as an endorsement. Sterling took it as a yes. "Well," Sterling said, reaching into his jacket pocket for his business card, "let's talk term sheets on Monday." "Actually," David interrupted, a sheen of sweat reappearing on his brow, "we have a bit of a timing crunch on the patent filing. If we could get a letter of intent signed tonight. I have the papers in my briefcase." It was clumsy. It was aggressive. But Sterling was charmed. He laughed. "Always closing, David. I like that." "Fine. Find me after the speeches. We will look at the paperwork." David beamed. He looked like a man who had just been handed a lifeline. He shook Sterling's hand vigorously. "Thank you, Arthur. You are saving lives." We walked away, David steering Leo toward our assigned table near the stage. As soon as we were out of earshot of the investors, David's smile vanished. He leaned down to Leo's ear. "You keep your mouth shut," he hissed. "You look sad. You look pathetic. That is your job tonight. If you mess this up for me, if you embarrass me, I will send you to that state facility in Ohio so fast your head will spin. Do you understand?" Leo looked down at his lap. "Yes, Dad." "And you," David said, turning to me. His grip on my arm tightened. "Good job with Sterling. But don't think I don't see you watching me. You stick to the script. We get the signature. We go home. We celebrate." "Celebrate," I repeated, "like we celebrated last night." David stopped. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "What is that supposed to mean?" I sipped my water, looking bored. "Just that we should actually open a bottle of champagne this time. You were so tired yesterday." David relaxed. He chuckled a dark, humorless sound. "Oh, we will celebrate, Sarah. Tonight is going to be the beginning of a whole new life for us." He had no idea how right he was. We reached our table. It was front and center, the VIP table reserved for the sponsors. I sat down, smoothing my gown. David parked Leo next to me and took the seat on the other side. He immediately pulled out his phone, likely texting his bookie that the money was coming. I looked around the room. I saw the faces of the people I had worked with for a decade. I saw the waiters moving through the shadows. And I saw the exits. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock. The speeches were about to begin. David was scheduled to speak at 8:30. He had insisted on it. He wanted to make a public appeal for donations using Leo as his prop on stage. He wanted the applause. He wanted the validation. I reached under the table and tapped Leo's hand. 2 taps. "Are you ready?" Leo tapped back. 1 strong tap. "Yes." My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a message from Marcus. "The forensic accounting is done. I have the flowcharts. I have the wire transfer records to the offshore accounts. And I have the police report from the hardware store in Trenton where he bought the timer switches. We are green." I took a deep breath. The net was closed. David was pouring himself a glass of wine, his hand steady now. He felt like he had already won. He looked at me and raised his glass. To family, he said, a smirk playing on his lips. I raised my glass. To the truth, David. He frowned slightly, not understanding, but he clinked his glass against mine anyway. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The master of ceremonies walked out to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 10th annual Hope for Mobility Gala. Tonight we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. David straightened his tie. He checked his reflection in a spoon. He was ready for his close-up. I looked at Leo. He was staring at the stage, his expression unreadable. But I knew what was happening inside that brilliant mind of his. He was counting down the seconds until he could stop pretending to be broken. The waiter arrived with the first course. I declined. I had no appetite. My hunger was of a different kind. I was starving for justice. David leaned over to me. After I speak, he whispered, I am going to bring Sterling to the table to sign. Once that is done, I want you to take Leo to the car. I will finish up here. You want me to leave early? I asked. David nodded. I have some business to discuss with the partners. It will be boring. You two should get some rest. I knew what that meant. He wanted us out of the public eye. He wanted us back in the house. He probably planned to come home late after we were asleep and finish the job he started with the gas. He wanted the check in his pocket and his family in the ground by sunrise. Okay, David, I said, whatever you say. The MC continued. And now I would like to introduce a man who has turned personal tragedy into a crusade for hope. Please welcome the founder of Vance Innovations, David Vance and his son Leo. The applause was thunderous. The room loved a tragedy. They loved a handsome father saving his son. David stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked around to Leo's wheelchair. Let's go, buddy, David said, unlocking the brakes. Showtime. He pushed Leo toward the stairs leading up to the stage. I watched them go. The spotlight followed them, a halo of light around a lie so dark it swallowed everything it touched. I sat alone at the table. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the small remote control Marcus had given me. It wasn't for a bomb. It was for the audio-visual system. I had paid the AV tech $5,000 to give me an override access to the main projector. David pushed Leo up the ramp and onto the center of the stage. He parked the wheelchair next to the podium. He patted Leo on the shoulder, a gesture that looked affectionate, but was actually a command to stay still. David stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the crowd. He looked handsome. He looked trustworthy. He looked like a hero. Thank you, David said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. Thank you all for being here. 2 years ago, my world stopped. He looked down at Leo. Leo looked at the floor. I watched my son, a boy full of life, lose the ability to run to play, to simply be a child. The crowd went silent. Handkerchiefs were dabbed at eyes. But tonight, David said, his voice rising, tonight is not about what we lost. It is about what we can regain. It is about the future. I looked at the remote in my hand. My thumb hovered over the button. David was winding up for his pitch. He was about to ask for the money. He was about to sell the soul of his son for a poker debt. I looked at Sterling at the next table. He was reaching for his checkbook. Not this time, David. I pressed the button. The screen behind David, which had been displaying the gala logo, flickered. David didn't notice. He was too busy looking at the audience, soaking in their adoration. But the audience noticed. A murmur rippled through the front rows. People started pointing. David kept talking. We are on the verge of a breakthrough. The screen went black for a second, then lit up with a video file. It wasn't the slick marketing video David had prepared. It was grainy footage, low light, a dashboard camera view. It was the interior of our garage dated 2 years ago. David stopped talking. He heard the gasps. He turned around, and the nightmare began. The spotlight on the stage was blindingly white, creating a halo around David's silhouette. He looked magnificent up there. He had perfected the posture of the humble visionary, his shoulders slightly hunched, as if bearing the weight of the world, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that forced the audience to lean in. He was telling the story of the night he supposedly found out about Leo's diagnosis. It was a lie, of course. On the night of the accident, David had been at a bar hitting on a waitress while I sat in the emergency room waiting for the surgeons. But the crowd didn't know that. They only saw a father wiping a tear from his cheek. I sat in the darkness of the VIP table, the light from my tablet reflecting softly against my face. To anyone watching, it looked like I was taking notes, perhaps jotting down talking points to support my husband's pitch. In reality, I was logged into the secure admin portal of the shell company I had established 3 years ago, Aurora Holdings. David thought he had borrowed $2 million from a private equity firm in Zurich to fund his initial prototype. He liked to brag about how he had charmed the Swiss bankers. He had no idea that Aurora Holdings was me. I was the lender. I was the bank. And tonight, I was the executioner. I listened to his voice boom over the speakers. I would give anything to see my son run again. David said, his hand resting possessively on Leo's shoulder. I have sacrificed my savings, my retirement, everything I own to build this company, because money means nothing when your child is in pain. I took a sip of my sparkling water. Money meant nothing. Let's test that theory. I tapped the screen. I opened the master loan agreement, clause 14B, the cross default provision. It was a standard clause in high-risk lending, but I had customized this one with a lethal trigger. It stated that if the borrower attempted to secure additional financing without disclosing existing liabilities, which he was doing right now with Arthur Sterling, the lender had the right to demand immediate repayment of the full principal and interest. Furthermore, any suspicion of criminal activity or fraud allowed for an immediate freeze of all attached collateral. I looked at the Execute button. It was red. David was winding up for the ask. He was about to turn to Arthur Sterling and the other investors to request the $5 million that would fund his escape to Brazil. He was smiling. He felt safe. He felt like the smartest man in the room. I pressed the red button. The command was sent. The software was instantaneous. It didn't care about emotions or galas or speeches. It simply executed the logic I had programmed. The first domino fell in the Cayman Islands. The hidden account Leo and I had uncovered, the one holding the remnants of the money he had stolen from household expenses, was flagged for money laundering review by the bank I had tipped off 10 minutes ago. Frozen. The second domino was his personal credit. The black card he carried in his tuxedo pocket, the one he used to project an image of limitless wealth, was linked to the corporate guarantee. My system sent a notification to the credit bureau marking the account as in default. I watched David on stage. He was mid-sentence. We are asking for partners who believe in miracles. Suddenly he twitched. His phone was in the inner pocket of his jacket right against his chest. It vibrated. He ignored it. He was a professional. He kept smiling. But then it vibrated again, and again, and again. It wasn't a text message. It was the relentless buzzing notification of a financial collapse. When you have premium banking apps, they alert you instantly when a transaction is declined or an account is frozen. I had set up the alerts myself when I bought him the phone. I knew the pattern. 3 short buzzes for a decline, 1 long buzz for a freeze. His chest was buzzing like a hive of angry bees. David faltered. He stumbled over the word future. He reached up to touch his chest, a reflexive action before remembering he was on stage. He forced his hand back down, but his rhythm was broken. He looked distracted. I sat back, crossing my legs. I scrolled to the next tab on my tablet, the deed of trust for the estate. He thought he was the co-owner of our home. He thought that if we divorced, he would get half. He didn't read the fine print of the refinancing papers he signed last year so he could buy that sports car. He had put his share of the house up as collateral against the business loan from Aurora Holdings. Since the business loan was now in default, the collateral was forfeit. I signed the digital foreclosure notice. Sent. Up on stage, David was sweating. The buzzing wasn't stopping. He knew something was wrong. He looked out into the audience, his eyes scanning the darkroom until they found me. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't looking at him with the adoration he expected. I was staring at him with a dead, flat expression. I held up my tablet slightly, just enough for him to see the glow of the screen. He squinted against the spotlight. He saw me. He saw the device. For a moment, his mask slipped. The grieving father vanished, replaced by the panicked conman. He looked at his Apple Watch, which must have mirrored the notifications from his phone. I could see him read the text on the tiny watch face. Account frozen. Card declined. Liquidation notice. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The microphone picked up his ragged breathing. The silence in the ballroom was heavy. The audience thought he was overcome with emotion. They thought he was choking back tears. "Take your time," someone shouted from the back. "We are with you, David." David swallowed hard. He looked terrified. He was realizing that he couldn't pay the caterers for this event. He couldn't pay the rental fee for the ballroom. He couldn't even pay for the Uber to get away from here. I tapped the screen again. This time, I went for the kill. I accessed the payroll system for his fake company, Vance Innovations. He had 3 employees accomplices, really, who helped him forge data. I terminated their contracts effective immediately and flagged their severance packages as void due to fraud. Then I forwarded the default notice to the email addresses of every investor in the room. Phones started lighting up at the tables around me. A ping here, a vibration there. Arthur Sterling, sitting 10 feet away, pulled out his BlackBerry. He frowned. He adjusted his glasses. He read the email that had just landed in his inbox, sent automatically by my system. Urgent insolvency alert regarding Vance Innovations. Do not disperse funds. I saw Sterling stiffen. He looked up at the stage. He looked at David with a new sharp scrutiny. The warmth was gone from his eyes. He put his checkbook back into his pocket. David saw it too. He saw the shift in the room. He saw the investors checking their phones, whispering to each other. The atmosphere changed from sympathy to suspicion in the span of 30 seconds. David was trapped. He was standing in front of 500 people, and he was completely broke. He didn't have a dollar to his name. The $15 million he planned to steal was gone. The $5 million he hoped to get was gone. Even the cash in his wallet was useless because I had just canceled the cards it was drawn from. He looked down at Leo. He needed a pivot. He needed to regain control. He gripped Leo's shoulder hard. Too hard. "Leo," he said, his voice cracking. "Leo, tell them how much this means to us." He was using the boy as a human shield. He was trying to squeeze a tear out of my stepson to distract the crowd from the buzzing phones. I watched Leo. This was it. David leaned down his microphone, picking up his desperate whisper. "Cry, damn it. Cry or you are dead." Leo looked up at his father. I had cleared the path. I had stripped the enemy of his armor. Now it was time for the knight to stand up. I put the tablet down on the table. The screen showed a final notification: transfer complete. Assets seized. I picked up my glass of champagne. I took a slow, deliberate sip. "Go ahead, David. Ask him again. Because the checks aren't going to clear. The car isn't going to start. And the wife you thought was stupid just repoed your entire life while wearing a designer gown." David looked back at me one last time. He saw the cold satisfaction in my eyes. He realized then that the accident with the gas wasn't an accident. He realized that the silence from me all day hadn't been submission. It had been the calm before the slaughter. His face turned a sickly shade of gray. His hands shook so badly he had to let go of the wheelchair. He was naked in front of the world, and I was the one holding his clothes. The ballroom was suffocatingly silent, save for the hum of the projector and the erratic breathing of the man standing next to me. David had called me up to the stage as his last resort. He was drowning in a sea of declined transactions and frozen assets, and like a drowning man, he was reaching for the only buoyancy aid he had left. "Miss Sarah," he said into the microphone, his voice wavering with a mixture of fear and forced affection. "Sarah has been my rock, my partner, the woman who stood by me when the doctors said there was no hope. Come up here, darling. Let them see the face of true courage." He extended his hand toward me. It was shaking. The audience applauded, politely unaware that they were witnessing a hostage situation disguised as a gala. I stood up from the table. My legs felt strong. My heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm that felt less like nervousness and more like the ticking of a clock counting down to 0. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The spotlight hit me blinding and hot. I took David's hand. It was cold and clammy. He pulled me close, kissing my cheek. "Smile," he hissed in my ear, so quiet that only I could hear. "Smile, or I will make sure Leo never sees another doctor." I pulled back and looked him in the eyes. I saw the desperation there. I saw the cornered animal. I took the microphone from his hand. He let it go, expecting me to deliver the prepared speech about his resilience, about his genius, about the miracle suit that didn't exist. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead, trying to compose himself for the check he thought was coming. I looked out at the audience. I saw Arthur Sterling frowning at his phone. I saw the confused faces of the donors. I saw the cameras broadcasting live. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice clear and steady, filling the cavernous room. "You talk so much about the past, about the accident that changed our lives, about the tragedy that put Leo in that chair." David nodded, encouraging me. "Yes," he whispered, "tell them." But before we talk about the future of Vance Innovations, I continued my tone shifting just a fraction, becoming colder, sharper. I think it is important that everyone understands exactly how that accident happened, because you see, David believes in transparency. Don't you, honey? David's smile faltered. He looked at me, confusion clouding his panic. Transparency. That wasn't in the script. "I have prepared a short video," I said, "a tribute to the man David really is." I raised the remote control I had concealed in my palm. David saw it. His eyes widened. He realized too late that the tech booth wasn't controlling the screen anymore. I was. I pressed play. The massive screen behind us, which had been displaying the golden logo of the foundation, went black for a heartbeat. Then it flickered to life. It wasn't a polished marketing video. It was grainy, high-contrast, black and white footage. The timestamp in the corner read, October 14th, 2024. 2 years ago. The audience murmured. They were squinting, trying to make out the image. It was the interior of a garage. Our garage. The camera angle was low, looking out from the dashboard of a car. It was the dash cam of the SUV that Leo had been riding in on the day of the crash. The dash cam that David had told the police was destroyed in the impact. The dash cam that Leo, with his brilliant mind and nimble fingers, had recovered from the wreckage before David could scrap it. On the screen, a figure walked into the frame. It was David. He was wearing his work coveralls. He looked younger, less stressed. He was whistling. The audience went deadly silent. They recognized him. On the screen, David knelt down by the front wheel of the car. He had a tool in his hand, a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. He slid under the chassis. I heard a gasp ripple through the room. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. The audio from the video crackled over the ballroom speakers. It was muffled at first, the sound of metal on metal, the grinding of a bolt. Then David's voice, clear as a bell. "Just a little snip," he muttered to himself. He slid out from under the car. He held up a severed black cable, the brake line. He stood up, wiping grease on his pants. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The audio picked up his side of the conversation perfectly. "Yeah, it is done, the on-screen," David said, laughing. "No, don't worry. I didn't cut it all the way. It will hold until they get on the highway. Once they hit 60 and try to stop, snap." I looked at the real David standing next to me on stage. He was frozen. He was staring at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He was watching himself commit the crime he had blamed on bad road conditions for 2 years. But the video wasn't done. The scene cut. It jumped to a new clip, this one in color, taken from a hidden camera in his office just last week. David was on the phone again, pacing back and forth, a glass of scotch in his hand. "She is so stupid," David was saying to someone on the other end. "Sarah actually thinks I care about the kid. The kid is a gold mine, Mike. As long as he is crippled, she writes the checks. I am going to milk this tragedy for another year, collect the donations, and then when the money piles up, maybe Leo has a sad decline. Maybe he doesn't wake up one morning." The collective intake of breath from the audience sucked the air out of the room. "That is $10 million in life insurance on her and another 2 on the kid." The recording continued. "I just need to figure out how to make it look like a house fire." Gas, maybe. The video froze on David's face, twisted in a greedy, ugly sneer. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of 500 people realizing they were sitting in the presence of a monster. I lowered the remote. I turned to David. He wasn't frozen anymore. The shock had broken. The realization that his life was over, that his freedom was gone, that his mask had been ripped off in front of the people he desperately wanted to impress, triggered something primal in him. He let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a roar of pure, terrified rage. "You!" he screamed. He lunged at me. He moved fast, his face purple, his veins bulging. He reached for the microphone in my hand, or maybe for my throat. "You doctored this," he shrieked, his voice cracking, spraying spit into the air. "This is a deep fake. She is lying. She is trying to frame me." He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. He tried to wrestle the microphone away, but I held on. I didn't pull back. I didn't scream. I stood my ground, letting the cameras capture every second of his violence. "She is crazy!" David yelled to the crowd, his eyes wild. "My wife is mentally unstable. She hates my son. She wants to destroy me because I asked for a divorce. Turn it off. Turn it off right now." He was frantic, looking toward the tech booth, waving his arms. "Don't you see?" he pleaded, looking at Arthur Sterling. "She is jealous. She is trying to sabotage the company. That video is fake. I love my son. I would never hurt him." He turned back to me, raising his hand as if to strike me. "You witch," he snarled. "You think anyone will believe you? I am David Vance. I am the father of the year. You are just a checkbook." He grabbed the lapels of my gown, shaking me. "Tell them it is fake, Sarah. Tell them right now, or I swear to God." I looked at him, calm and unblinking. "You swear to God what, David?" "That you will cut my brakes too, or that you will blow up the Plaza Hotel like you tried to blow up our house last night." He froze. My words hit him like a physical blow. He realized I knew about the gas. He realized the accident story I had fed him that morning was part of the trap. He let go of me, stumbling back. He looked around the stage, looking for an exit, looking for a weapon, looking for anything. His eyes landed on Leo. Leo, who was sitting in his wheelchair a few feet away, watching the screen where his father admitted to crippling him. David's face twisted. He needed a hostage. He needed leverage. "He wants to kill me," David shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the boy. "He is the one. The kid is dangerous. He made the video. He hates me because I try to make him walk." It was pathetic. It was the flailing of a man who had fallen off a cliff and was trying to grab at roots on the way down. And then the moment came. The moment the entire evening had been built for. David took a step toward Leo, his hands reaching out to grab the wheelchair, perhaps to push him off the stage, perhaps to hide behind him. "Stay away from him," I said, my voice sharp. David ignored me. "I am taking my son," he yelled. "We are leaving." He reached for the handles of the chair, and then the wheelchair rolled backward. Not because David pulled it, but because Leo pushed it. And then the brakes clicked, and Leo stood up. He did not just reach for me. He lunged with the desperate, violent energy of a man who saw his entire world collapsing and needed something to break. His hands, which had so often played the part of the gentle healer, were now claws. He shoved me hard against the chest. The force of it took me by surprise. I stumbled back, my high heels catching on the plush carpet of the stage. I fell. It was not a graceful fall. I hit the floor hard, the impact jarring my spine, my gown tearing slightly at the hem. The audience screamed. It was a collective sound of horror, a wave of noise that crashed against the stage. They were watching the man of the hour, the saintly father, physically assault his wife on a live stream that was being broadcast to thousands. "You ungrateful bitch," David screamed, standing over me, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You ruined everything. I will kill you. I swear I will kill you." He raised his hand again, a fist this time ready to strike me while I was down. He had forgotten the cameras. He had forgotten the investors. In that moment, he was just a violent, bankrupt narcissist who wanted to punish the woman who had dared to outsmart him. I did not flinch. I did not cover my face. I looked up at him, my eyes wide and steady. I wanted the world to see this. I wanted them to see the monster beneath the suit. But the blow never landed, because behind him a sound echoed through the ballroom. It was a loud metallic crash, the sound of heavy steel hitting the floor. David froze. His fist hovered in the air. The rage in his eyes flickered, replaced by confusion. He turned around slowly. The audience fell silent, the kind of silence that is heavy and thick where you can hear a pin drop. The wheelchair was on its side. It lay there like a discarded shell, its wheels spinning lazily in the air. And standing next to it was Leo. He was not struggling. He was not holding on to the podium for support. He was standing tall, straighter than I had ever seen him. In the 2 years he had spent sitting down, I had forgotten how tall he was. He had grown. He was 14 now, and he looked like a young man, strong and formidable. David stared at him. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he was hallucinating. He blinked rapidly, shaking his head, trying to make the image fit the reality he had constructed. Leo took a step, then another. His gait was smooth, confident. There was no tremor in his legs. There was no limp. These were the legs of a boy who had been running laps in the backyard at midnight while his father slept. These were the legs of a boy who had been healing in secret, hiding his strength to survive his own parent. David stumbled back away from me, away from the son he had tried to keep broken. "No," David whispered the microphone, picking up his trembling voice. "No, that is impossible. You are paralyzed." The doctor said. Leo walked past his father. He did not look at him. He walked straight to where I was lying on the floor. He reached down. His hand was steady. "Here's Sarah," he said softly. He pulled me up. He was strong. He lifted me to my feet with an ease that made the audience gasp again. He brushed the dust off my arm. He looked at me with a fierce protectiveness that brought a lump to my throat. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am fine," I said, straightening my dress. Leo turned to face his father. He walked to the microphone stand. He adjusted the height, raising it up. He looked out at the sea of shocked faces, at the cameras, at the world. Then he looked at David. "Dad, stop acting," Leo said. His voice was deep, clear, and devoid of fear. David shook his head, backing away until he hit the edge of the projector screen. "Leo, listen to me. It is a miracle. It is the shock, the adrenaline. You are confused. Sit down. You need to sit down before you hurt yourself." "I am not confused," Leo said, his voice booming through the speakers. "And I do not need to sit down. My legs have been fine for 6 months. A murmur ripped through the crowd. Arthur Sterling was standing up at his table, his mouth agape. 6 months. Leo continued, stepping closer to David. "I could have walked any time. But you told me that if I got better, Sarah would throw us out. You told me she hated me. You injected me with drugs to make my legs weak whenever we had to go to the hospital." Liar David shrieked, looking frantically at the audience. "He is lying." She brainwashed him. "I spit out the pills, Dad," Leo said calmly. "I have been spitting them out since March, and I have been recording everything." Leo reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a small black device. "I heard you on the phone with the insurance agent," Leo said. "I heard you planning the fire. I heard you say that I was worth more dead than alive." David looked at the device in Leo's hand. He looked at the wheelchair on the floor. He looked at me standing beside his son, alive and untouched. He realized then that he was completely alone. "And one more thing," Leo said, his voice hardening. He pointed at me. "You told everyone tonight that Sarah is an outsider. You told me she is not family." Leo looked at me, and for the first time he smiled. A genuine warm smile. "Sarah is the only family I have," Leo said. "She is the one who bought the food. She is the one who checked my homework. She is the one who stayed up when I was sick. And she is the only reason I am alive tonight. She is not an outsider. She is my mother. And you are nothing." The word hung in the air. Nothing. David broke. He let out a strangled cry and turned to run. He scrambled toward the wings of the stage, desperate to find a dark corner, a back exit anywhere to hide from the lights that were exposing him. But he didn't make it to the curtain. From the shadows of the stage wings, a figure emerged, tall, imposing, and dressed in a dark suit that meant business. It was Marcus. And behind him were 4 uniformed officers from the New York Police Department and the chief of police himself. David skidded to a halt. He turned to run the other way, but 2 more officers stepped out from the other side. He was surrounded. Marcus walked onto the center stage. He didn't look at David. He walked straight to the microphone, taking it from Leo. "David Vance." Marcus said, his voice booming with the authority of a former federal prosecutor. "You are under arrest." David fell to his knees. It wasn't a gesture of surrender. His legs just gave out. He collapsed into a heap of expensive fabric and ruined ambition. For what, David sobbed, his hands clawing at his face. "I didn't do anything. It is a misunderstanding." Marcus pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Sarah Vance." And Leo. Vance, Marcus, read his tone clinical and cold. "For insurance fraud in the first degree, for wire fraud, for money laundering, and for multiple counts of child endangerment and abuse." The officers moved in. They grabbed David by the arms and hauled him up. He was dead weight. He was weeping now, loud, ugly sobs that echoed in the silent ballroom. They pulled his arms behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Click, click. The cameras zoomed in. They captured every second of it. The father of the year being dragged away in chains, snot running down his nose, begging for mercy from the people he had tried to rob. Marcus turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said calmly, "please remain seated. The police will be taking statements. The gala is over." He nodded to me. A small, subtle nod of respect. I walked over to the edge of the stage where David was being led away. I wanted him to see me one last time. He looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "Sarah," he whimpered. "Sarah, please. I can explain. Don't let them take me. I am your husband." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No anger, no fear. Just the cool, refreshing absence of him. I leaned down just close enough for him to hear. "You were never my husband, David," I whispered. "You were just a bad investment. And I just liquidated you." The officers dragged him away. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open, and the flashing lights of the police cars outside flooded into the room. I turned back to Leo. He was standing by the overturned wheelchair. He looked tired, but he looked free. I walked over to him and held out my hand. "Ready to go home?" I asked. Leo looked at the wheelchair. He kicked it. It slid across the stage and crashed off the edge, landing in the orchestra pit with a final decisive thud. "Yeah," Leo said, taking my hand. "I am ready to walk." We walked off the stage together, leaving the chaos, the cameras, and the ruins of David's life behind us. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. We had survived the fire, and we had risen from the ashes, not as victims, but as the ones holding the matches. 3 months after the gala, I sat in the front row of the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan. The air in the room was stale recycled and heavy with the scent of floor wax and impending doom. I wore a suit of sharp tailored navy blue, the kind of armor I used to wear to board meetings where I had to fire incompetent executives. Today I was watching the ultimate termination. David sat at the defense table. He looked nothing like the man who had charmed investors and hosted charity balls. The prison barber had shaved his expensive haircut. His suit was ill-fitting, provided by his public defender, because I had frozen every asset he owned, leaving him unable to afford his own clothes, let alone a high-powered attorney. He looked small. He looked gray. He looked like exactly what he was, a con man who had run out of road. When the judge asked him to rise, David trembled. I watched his knees shake, and I felt a cold, distant satisfaction. For 2 years, he had forced his son to sit still to pretend to be weak. Now David was the one who could barely stand. The sentencing was brutal and thorough. The evidence Marcus and Leo had gathered was overwhelming. The forensic accounting proved the wire fraud and the embezzlement. The dashcam footage proved the premeditation. But it was the audio recordings from the bug in his coat that sealed his fate. The jury had listened in horror as David complained about his son's survival and plotted to finish the job with gas. The judge looked down at David over the rim of his glasses. "David Vance, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the charge of attempted murder in the first degree. You are sentenced to an additional 20 years for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated child abuse. These sentences are to run consecutively." The gavel came down. It was a sharp, final sound. It sounded like a lock clicking shut. David turned to look at the gallery. He scanned the faces, looking for someone, anyone who might look at him with pity. He found no one. Even his own family had distanced themselves after the news broke. Then his eyes found mine. For a second, I saw the old David try to surface. The manipulator. He opened his mouth perhaps to mouth a silent plea or maybe a final curse. I didn't look away. I simply raised my eyebrows slightly, a look of cool indifference. I checked my watch. I had a meeting at 2. He was wasting my time. The bailiffs moved in. They shackled his hands and feet. As he shuffled out of the courtroom, the chains rattling with every step, he didn't look like a monster anymore. He just looked like a bad memory that was finally fading away. The aftermath of his destruction was messy, as these things always are, but I handled it with the same precision I applied to my portfolio. The first order of business was Vance Innovations. Technically, the company still existed. It was a shell filled with debt and bad press, but it held the patents to the few legitimate pieces of code Leo had written over the years, code that David had stolen and claimed as his own. I attended the bankruptcy hearing myself. The trustee looked at me with confusion when I made my offer. "You want to buy the company, Mrs. Vance?" he asked. "It has zero value. The brand is toxic." "I know," I said, sliding a single crisp dollar bill across the polished mahogany table. "I am buying it for the intellectual property and for the satisfaction." The trustee shrugged and took the dollar. I signed the papers. 10 minutes later, Vance Innovations was dead. In its place, I incorporated a new entity, the Phoenix Foundation. Its mission was simple. We would use the technology Leo developed to create low-cost, high-tech accessibility tools for disabled children, and we would use the profits to fund legal defense for victims of domestic financial abuse. I took David's legacy of lies and turned it into a fortress of truth. Every time the foundation saved a child, it would be another nail in the coffin of his ego. But the most important legal document I signed wasn't a business contract. It was the adoption decree. Since David was incarcerated for crimes against his child, his parental rights were terminated immediately. The state of Connecticut usually placed children in foster care in these situations, but I wasn't going to let that happen. The adoption hearing was quiet and private. Just me, Leo Marcus, and the judge. When the judge asked Leo if he agreed to the adoption, if he wanted to be my son legally, Leo didn't hesitate. He stood up. He walked to the bench. He looked the judge in the eye. "She is already my mother, Your Honor," Leo said. "We are just making the paperwork match the reality." The judge smiled and signed the order. We walked out of that courthouse not as a stepmother and a victim, but as a family. A real one. Life has changed since that night at the gala. I sold the estate. I couldn't live in a house where the vents had been blocked and the stove had been rigged. The memories of the gas smell were too strong. We moved to a penthouse in the city closer to my office and closer to the best tech schools for Leo. Leo is thriving. He is 15 now, and he is a force of nature. He is no longer the quiet, traumatized boy hiding in a wheelchair. He is the youngest intern in the history of my venture capital firm. He works in our cybersecurity division, helping us vet potential investments. He has an uncanny ability to spot frauds. He says he learned from the best his father. Sometimes when we are working late in the office ordering pizza and going over code, I look at him and I marvel at his resilience. David tried to break his legs, and then he tried to break his mind. He failed at both. Leo walks with a confident stride, and his mind is sharper than a diamond. Last week, a letter arrived from the state penitentiary. The return address was a cell block number. It was from David. I didn't open it. I didn't burn it either. That would be too dramatic. I simply walked over to the shredder in my office. I fed the envelope into the machine. I watched as the paper was sliced into thousands of tiny, illegible confetti strips. Leo looked up from his computer. "David?" he asked. I nodded. Leo smiled. It was a small, contented smile. "Recycle it," Leo said. "We are green." I laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to be free. David had spent years building a cage for us. He thought he held the keys. He thought that by controlling the money, the narrative, and our physical safety, he could own us. He didn't realize that he was locking himself in with a lioness and her cub. He had tried to use fire to erase us. He wanted to burn the house down to collect a check, but he forgot the oldest rule of alchemy. Fire destroys wood, and it destroys paper, and it destroys lies. But it does not destroy gold. It only makes it purer. It only makes it shine brighter. We walked through the fire, Leo and I, and we came out the other side, not as ash, but as solid, unbreakable gold. As I look out over the city lights tonight, sipping a glass of wine that I bought with my own money, in a home that is safe and full of peace, I feel a deep, overwhelming sense of victory. The best revenge wasn't sending him to prison, though that was satisfying. The best revenge is living a life so full of joy and success that he doesn't even exist in it anymore. Now I have a question for you. We all have moments where we have to stand up to the people who underestimate us. Which moment in our story gave you the most satisfaction? Was it the moment Leo stood up from his wheelchair at the gala, revealing the lie and silencing his father forever? Or was it the moment on stage when David's phone started buzzing against his chest, alerting him that I had frozen every single penny he had, stripping him of his power in front of the entire world? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed seeing a toxic manipulator get exactly what he deserved, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. There are many more stories of justice to tell, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone make you believe you are powerless.